So hopefully this will work, and I can share my screen. Okay, hi everybody. Katie's very concisely put together a bit of a snapshot of what we mean by the space sector. But I'm not going to start from a perspective of building and launching pieces of kit, because actually I came from the other end of the industry. I'm an Earth observation specialist. I'm a geologist by background, and I was lucky enough to go into my first job as a geologist, but be sent off pretty much immediately to learn how to use satellite data to aid our exploration programs around the world, which meant that actually I was in the most fantastic position to be able to do all the things I wanted to do, which was sort of work outside, do something really interesting, and travel a lot. And indeed, my job absolutely filled all of those wishes on my wish list, and which was pretty spectacular, really. And I was able to work literally all over the globe, get involved in all sorts of different things at an early stage, not least because at that point, Earth observation was a new technology that companies were using around the world. Because of that, I was invited to help with conferences and all sorts of things. Got to be in incredible places, which one way and another has taken me through from industry, through academia, and now into the UK Space Agency, where my job is all about helping other people see how they can get a job in the sector, but also to help companies with the needs that they have for skills that they can see they're going to need in the future. And that kind of takes me to all sorts of crazy places, to working with children and school children. It takes me into silly astronaut costumes when we go to things like careers events and science events, and to work in all sorts of different places across the globe. So what did I study? I did A-levels in geography, physics and chemistry and maths. And the way I got here was pretty checkered, I guess. It wasn't a straight line. And in many ways, I think that's true of many of the people with whom I work, that we all have jobs that started in one place and have gone to another. And when you're offered an interesting opportunity to go forward and take you somewhere else, then seize that opportunity. Don't ever turn it down for whatever reason, as long as it's legal, of course. What are the things that I most enjoy about my job? I love working with the people. I love the variety of what I do, because now it's not just about Earth navigation satellites, telecommunications data, and of course lots of the people that Katie has just talked about, who are engineers and coming from that perspective. What's the aspect I least enjoy about my work? Dare I say it, sometimes it's also those same people who ask you impossible things that you then have to do in seconds flat. But every day has a different challenge, and it's all fun. Are there opportunities for the future? Absolutely, exactly as Katie has suggested. One thing to remember is that 25% of the people working across the sector are actively working at building and launching pieces of kit. But 75% of the people working across the sector are using that data from satellites every day in all sorts of ways that helps us all do go about our daily lives. So if you've got a passion, as I did, for geology, don't think it's going to it's going to constrain you from getting into space. It can absolutely take you to where you want to be. And or if you want to think about doing something like that, follow your passion, but add a space veneer and make sure you can code, because that's really, really important. And maybe from then I can hand over to Andrew, who's
So my name is Andrew Palavoda. I'm the CEO of Responsive Access. We're developing software in order to simplify access to space. Currently, there's large amounts of man hours and labor that go into the management of satellites, and we believe that software can be used to effectively manage these situations. So with this, we're creating a portal, which will be a one-stop shop integrating all of the different service offerings together. As space is developing, it's becoming a more complex landscape. So we're building partnerships with spacecraft manufacturers, launch vehicle providers, ground station companies, insurance, as well as things like logistics and environmental tests in order to wrap this all together. Right now, we're just working on the minimum viable product, which will be the baseline for this. So we've got a team of 5 people right now. We've got 4 here, but I couldn't find a nice picture of our 5th. And we're working on this portal. So me, I'm the CEO. In terms of my background, I didn't do incredibly well at school. I found it very difficult. I'm somebody that has ADHD, which is attention deficit hyperactivity disorder. So that means that it's very difficult for me to concentrate. I was able to get through school and ended up on a computer science program, and then moved to study business, and I went to an electrical engineering night school. But on the ADHD point, I think it's important to that because it doesn't really matter so much as your background, but is your determination, your skills in order to push forward. And if you want to do this, you can do this. And it's not so much about what you study, but your skills and what you can bring to the table. So I kind of fell into the space industry. After university, I ended up in several roles. I was doing a lot of work within the promotional merchandise industry, both as a project manager and in manufacturing, which surprisingly has a lot of transferable skills over to the space industry. I started off as a business development manager before moving to be a project manager and the head of launch at a satellite company in Glasgow, producing the very small satellites, which is the growth area for the space industry. I'm currently the CEO of Responsive Access. In terms of what that involves, I'm faced with new challenges every day and managing the growth of Responsive Access. We started in August last year, now have 5 people, and we're currently going through another growth spurt. And I see some of the people that are attending this webinar are actually joining us soon. So in terms of what I enjoy most about my work, being faced with that challenge and variation in my work is very exciting. You're not tied to one functional area or one task. It's very much like a buffet of work, and there's a lot of collaboration between different people, different organizations, and that's very true with the whole space industry. We don't have the answer to our problems through one person or one organization. It's always very collaborative work, and there is that bouncing between areas. The aspect that I least enjoy, it has to be documentation. Space is a very documentation heavy area, but it's critical and imperative for good documentation to be in place for future success, for other people to understand our you're doing. It's time consuming and repetitive, but it's a necessary evil, like death and taxes. If you want to have good code that's understood, you need to document. So if you want to get a good grasp on the space industry and really excel, I'd really recommend looking at ECSS and some of the ISO quality standards for kind of getting a head start on that documentation. In terms of what I think the opportunities are for young people in space, and it's a huge growth area, and responsive access, we're getting new people all the time, and no matter what your skills are, it's not just engineering people are looking for. And like Kathy said, she's a geologist. There's huge amounts of growth areas and skills needed within space, whether it's legal, whether it's business, whether it's some of the other social sciences, or things like psychology and medicine. There's that growth is opening up these opportunities. And responsive access is majority an under 30 company in terms of age. And we need these skills that are coming through. So my advice to people wanting to join and get involved in the space industry would be to build hobbies and side projects. And if you want to build CubeSats, if you want to build rockets, build them. You'll build up the key skills that you need. You'll have fun. It's passion that people are looking for. It's that passion and drive in order to get hands dirty and to build drones. Get hands dirty and build stuff. Build the skills for programming and things like this. For anybody that is considering joining the space industry, I would be honest with you. We're not doing this for earning megabucks. It is very much a passion-based industry. And if you want to get stuff into space and be on the cutting edge of things, the future of humanity is in space, and our survival is dependent on this. Space is very cool, but you're not going to be earning as much as you would be if you were in finance or banking. But it's awesome. You get to work on hard problems every day. It is truly an awesome place to be. And what opportunities exist at Responsive Access now? Well, we're in an earlier commercialization phase. We're currently developing our key products. So the main roles that we're looking for right now are within requirements engineering and developments and business development. But in future, there'll be opportunities around legal as well as others. So thanks very much, guys. If you have any questions as well, my email address is there, and I'd be very happy to talk to you all.
Yep. I will share my screen, and hopefully you can see that. Can you see that? Great. Okay, so yeah, I'm Robert Elliott. I am the head of business development at Aerospace, and we're a national space science and technology laboratory located in Harwell in Oxfordshire, and we're part of a pretty big organisation, Science, Technology and Facilities Council. It's part of the UK Research Innovation, and that's the organisation that's kind of responsible for investing most of the UK's funding into research and innovation and into the universities and supporting grants and things like that. And then within that, it also has these national laboratories, and one of them is Aerospace. And really our, our desire, our aspiration is to create as much impact we can on society and the economy through new knowledge. And that attracted me to join the organization, because I've kind of always been really passionate about science and engineering in general, and particularly in the way that you can use it to solve really big challenges. And my particular passion was about how do we protect our environment and understand climate change a little better. And that kind of drove me to do a degree in chemistry at Heriot-Watt in Edinburgh, and I was really interested in the physical chemistry and air quality instrumentation aspects. And then following on from that, I did a lot of professional courses in environmental testing, for especially on big polluting things like factories, oil refineries, incineration. And actually, I used to have to climb up these chimneys and measure the emissions coming out of them. And I also carried on doing things like key account management and more training in the business development side. And so again, I kind of ended up in the aerospace or the space sector, just because I had an interest in sort of understanding problems and challenges, and actually realized that space and the data that the satellites give us in many cases provide most incredible solutions to a lot of these grand challenges. And that we're still sort of developing those solutions now, and it's incredible to see. And even when I after leaving uni, and I initially got a job as I didn't want to sort of take a bit of time out. I got a job as this industrial abseiler and spent a lot of time in Scotland on big structures and looking at the structural health of big structures in Scotland. And even that now is an area where is of considerable interest to the satellite industry. But it was only about 9 years ago that I thought, actually, I want to take a leap and kind of move to the dark side, if sometimes call it, from being a scientific lead and to be focused more on the sort of business side, and be more sort of commercially minded. And so that really gave me the real sort of the ladder, or the ability to get into space properly, and looking at very closely at how the organizations that I work for, including places like the Surrey Space Centre that span out one of the UK's most successful space companies, Surrey Satellite Technologies, supporting them even in how they develop new Earth observation applications. And so it's always been, really, I've always sort of tried to focus on things that are, I find really interesting, kind of intellectually, and just going with it really, and taking opportunities as they come. And nowadays, I find myself, responsible for the industrial engagement at Aerospace. And I was saying it's a national lab. We've had about 300 employees in total, about £30 million per annum, and a lot of that comes from industry. And essentially, as a business development manager, you need to make sure that you've got enough opportunities coming into the organisation that allow you to be sustainable and successful, and generate that impact that your peers want you to provide these benefits to society. And then the other aspect that I get involved in is just supporting the space community as a whole in the UK. So I do a lot of work supporting new national initiatives. I try and do outreach in our local schools. I travel the world, organising and running international events, often in collaboration with some of our colleagues here, like at the UK Space Agency, and also even helping to provide funds for new startups and helping with business incubation and things like that. So it's really varied, and all these things happen, on a daily basis, and it's, a very exciting place to work. I think the things that I most enjoy really are just ideas, really, talking to people, whether it's formally in a big meeting or, in a corridor, and I just, it blows my mind, every day that we talk about, what the next big satellite mission is that we could do, and we actually have the means and the ability to team up with others, especially to actually deliver those missions, and actually make them a reality. And those are the things that we're doing right now. And I guess on the flip side of that is sometimes you're not successful, after all that hard work and months of effort and proposal writing, sometimes it just doesn't work. But you just got to kind of dust yourself off and get on with it and try again, basically. So there are absolutely heaps of opportunities for the younger generation. I think pure science, technology, engineering, and mathematics subjects will always be incredibly important. But there's this whole raft of other roles, and especially as Kathy already mentioned, an intense interest in AI, algorithm development, predictive modeling, to really squeeze every bit of value out of the data that we get from the satellites. But then also, about how you deliver a project effectively and we have, project managers, quality assurance, product assurance, and then also about how we sort of communicate our impact and our successes. And, there's a whole, we have teams of people, involved in social media, public outreach and engagement. And, there's no point us doing a lot of these big missions unless we talk to people about it and share our stories. And that's, it's really, really crucial. And then also on the business and entrepreneurship side. So we need a lot of people with commercial and entrepreneurial skills that are going to really be able to, exploit the new science and technology that we're developing on a daily basis. My advice, I guess, I had a quick think about this. I think, one of the things that I found of real value, a couple of times at very particular points in my career was to have a really good kind of mentor, someone that was much more senior than me and, that was involved in the sector that I could talk to, and, they could listen to me and, so, talk through my ideas. And that often gave me a lot of confidence in just how it kind of validated how I was approaching things. And, what I've found as well is that, being having a professional approach is important, but also being your unique self and, recognizing that you have a personality and character, and we're all, very diverse set of people. And, organizations recognize that diversity. And we really sort of celebrate that. And we want lots of different people working together, because that's how we get the best ideas and the best missions. I guess just a minor thing as well, I get a lot of CVs and things, and if a job advert does ask for a cover letter, you should make sure you do one, because I often have a pile of CVs, and and the ones that don't have a cover letter go in the in the no bin. So yeah, make sure you read the instructions when you're applying for jobs and things. Finally, I mean, at Aerospace right now, we are looking for a wide range of people with a variety of very specialist experience, but also, transferable skills and experience, and, across technology and scientists, systems engineers, a lot in IT and software now, but also, as I mentioned, things like quality, project management, and business support specialists. And I think, working at Aerospace, I think it's a fantastic place. It's got some excellent work-life package and well-being objectives around it. So really good on holidays, and quite flexible in terms of its working standards. And also, they'll pay for things like membership to professional bodies and give you lots of continuous professional development. So thank you very much.
I'm Robin Haig, I'm head of launch for Skyward. I'm currently involved with exploring the opportunities and resolving the issues around launching our series of development vehicles. And I suppose essentially I'm a rocketeer. If we move over to the presentation, I began, maybe like many in the space industry, with something like this at high school age, being part of model rocketry. My first encounter actually was when one of my friends bought the starter kit, and well, actually he bought a model rocket, and being one always to economize, he didn't buy the starter kit, so we had to launch it instead with a stack of AA batteries sellotaped together and some mains wire. It worked quite well in the end. We moved on to planning to send the first teenage rocket to space, and we had an actual textbook to guide us, which was very useful. Fortunately for our own health and safety, we never got very far with these efforts. But on a more formal note, with education, I started off with aeronautical engineering. I was never especially academic, and when I discovered that you could do the BTEC route rather than A-levels, and my local college was doing aeronautical engineering, they were building an aeroplane. I don't know, do you get the mouse up on there? Well, it's immaterial really, it's only one picture, but the college was building an aeroplane like this called a kit box. So I opted to do this, which was equivalent to I think about 3 A-levels, something like that, in aeronautical engineering. And really, of course, I picked building an aeroplane. I didn't actually pick the course, but it was an excellent background. It gave a good overall mix of practical hands-on and aeronautical engineering theory. In the end, I know that this particular aeroplane was sold incomplete about 10 years later. It's one of the challenges of trying to do a project like that at an educational institution where people change every year. I moved on to do physics with space technology at the University of Salford, which was a fascinating degree. Again, as far as I was concerned at the time, I was picking space technology, and the physics just happened to come along. But it proved a very useful move, because Salford at the time was involved with a company called Star Chaser, which was endeavouring, actually as I see it now, rather a brute force and ignorance approach towards the X Prize, but doing some interesting stuff, launching large, I mean, nominally it works out as a large model the way it was designed, but launching large rockets to try and make step-by-step developments towards the X Prize that the organization that has become Virgin Galactic ultimately won, and wanting to make some sort of serious contribution and have some sort of serious role in actual launch and development. I started studying propulsion, because that was what Star Chaser was sorely missing, was some sort of in-house propulsion. So I studied did projects related to hybrid rocket engines, building up from small engines, testing out various geometry, various approaches to it. And ultimately this led to working at Star Chaser as it moved from being a sort of an amateur organization to a space startup. And we were able to do some quite significant testing on the ground at the UK Health and Safety Laboratory. This is my 1.25 ton thrust liquid oxygen reclaimed rubber hybrid, which is the same sort of stuff that Virgin Galactic used for Spaceship One. And I believe this was the biggest British hybrid until Bloodhound. Maybe actually still, I'm not quite sure how it relates to the exactly in size to the Bloodhound hybrid. Hybrids were almost fashionable at that point, and that is partly what led Virgin towards a hybrid. They appear to have a lot of advantages, but they have a lot of challenges to actually get them running, partly just because they don't have quite the same heritage as the bi-liquid, which we moved on to, and were able to develop a 3-ton thrust LOX kerosene bi-liquid, which we ran successfully again at the Health and Safety Laboratory. Quite an interesting experience trying to do something of this scale actually at Health and Safety Executive's own laboratory. So it was quite a coup for us to be allowed to do there, to work there and return there with them. Quite happy for us to go back and carry out more testing. So this engine that we see in close up in the top left was developed to the point where it would run its full duration of about a minute without any damage. And so this one could have been the basis of our X Prize entry had things run on a little bit further. Part of the problem with the X Prize, with the original X Prize, was that Mojave Aerospace Ventures, that has evolved into Virgin Galactic, was so far ahead of everyone else that when they won the prize, most of the effort of other teams was tailed off or stopped. And this left me with something of a challenge, because the opportunity to work in rockets in the UK at that time was very limited, without Star Chaser there continuing. And there was not the same government interest at all in space at that point in the early 90s. What the UK Space Agency has become since its founding around, I think, 2008, is extraordinary, and the transformation in official attitudes towards space in the UK is remarkable. Whereas at this point, the official position was actively anti-rocket, and we didn't do things like that along with human spaceflight. So this led me in the interim to be working in nuclear safety inspection robotics with a company called Doosan Babcock in Glasgow. And this is designing, constructing, and using, actually, I ended up across the whole range from meeting customers originally through to using the robots actually in place in the power stations. This is robotics to go to the difficult, dirty, or dangerous places to go to within the power stations to make sure that they're all working okay, and to keep the nasty stuff in. It was a very interesting field to work in, and leading up to creating some very interesting ones for ITER, for the new global fusion reactor, sort of snake robots that can climb through pipes and things. But still, I'm a rocketeer and was looking to get back to space, but looking to get back to propulsion. I was fortunate enough to be able to continue doing some other side projects related to rocketry at the same time, educational demonstration hybrids, and some stuff for TV. Here we are propelling Vic Reeves on a hybrid rocket-powered Sinclair C5 at the Top Gear airfield. And we believe that this particular project was the only project ever to have made useful thrust from food as a fuel, because it ran on nitrous oxide and frozen fish and chips. The most significant one for me for my individual projects, though, was Black Streak, which we can see taking off here from the Mull of Galloway. And this was a concept that was funded by the Northwest Regional Development Agency for an educational launch vehicle, such that we could get school payloads as high as possible with the largest propulsion that was conveniently purchasable in the UK, because schools can create model rockets that can get to a reasonable height, but we felt that if we optimized the design for, as I say, for the biggest motors available, we would be able to get school payloads up to something closer to a space environment. It's still a long way off space. We were looking about 18 kilometers. And as far as I'm aware, because we never managed to find the top bit with the recording altimeter, this is the UK's greatest private altitude until we launch Skylark Micro with Skyrora hopefully very soon. So mostly my career has been a lack of planning and just following whatever the most interesting opportunity appeared to be at the time, which I'm not sure necessarily I would recommend. I think it probably would have been good to have more of a plan, but it has worked out quite well, because this unusual spread of background that I had has led me to Skyrora, both the combination of experience on multi-ton thrust rocket engines, which is increasingly rare in the UK, and some practical hands-on experience with launching vehicles like this to an altitude greater than that high-power rocketry typically goes to, was an ideal combination, fortunately for me, for joining Skyrora a couple of years ago. And now we're looking at using vehicle like this as a stepping stone towards our larger ones. We've got a sequence of rockets starting off with commercially available solid rocket propulsion so that we can fly electronics and practice systems and procedures whilst our indigenous bespoke propulsion is coming along, pushing higher and higher, leading up to Skylark L, which was in the news a couple of weeks ago, that we have been able to successfully ground test in the UK. And it's a fascinating time to be involved. Didn't mean to actually stop sharing at that point. But yes, thinking of the questions, which I have mislaid. The most interesting aspect, of course, is the opportunity to be building and flying vehicles. Certainly the least enjoyable aspect, as Andrew mentioned, is the paperwork, because there's a lot involved. But it is very necessary to demonstrate, to enable us to launch in a safe and responsible fashion, and to build up the experience, build up the procedures, build up the practice to be able to launch the much larger vehicles that we're working towards. There are tremendous opportunities coming up, all the tremendous opportunities already, but there's tremendous opportunities coming up as the UK space sector expands. Very much at the time that I started, we were somewhat stuck because of the limited opportunities, at least with regards to launch vehicles. But now across the board, launch vehicles, launch activities, satellites, satellite development, and indeed, of course, fortunately, we continue to be part of ESA. We don't fall out of that. So even there's the chance, much better chance now for UK citizens to become astronauts in the way that it was very, very difficult beforehand. So it's a great sector to be involved in. It's a good time to be getting into it. The best time there has ever been to be getting into it. And it's only going to be getting more interesting.
There's a few sections in my presentation that I can go through rather quickly. The pro, however, is that I've been able to look at all the questions, and I've actually amended my slides to answer as many of the questions that I saw as possible. So let's get started. My name is Remco Timmermans. I have a slightly different background than some of my colleagues here. First of all, I'm relatively new to the space industry. I'm kind of in my second career right now, which I'll talk about a little bit more further on. And I'm also not an English citizen. I'm one of those people who is from a country that did not really have a big space industry. I do live in Harwell near Oxford, like my friend Robert here as well, just because the opportunity is here. But I'm originally Dutch, and I grew up in a world where space basically did not exist. That's also the reason why I didn't start my career in space. I started my career in a very different way, which I'll come back to. So I have a Dutch passport. I live in the UK since just over a year, and I'm also an Estonian e-resident for Brexit avoidance reasons. My companies are actually based in Estonia, which offers a really, really good electronic way of running an EU business from outside the EU. I'm self-employed. I run my own company. I do not have any vacancies, nor do I plan to have any in the near future. But I have loads of other tips on how to create a career in space. So I'm self-employed. I work in social media. I'm not a rocket scientist. I'm not an engineer. But I'm very, very proud to say that I do work in the space industry. Let's see, how do I progress this? Yes, like this. As I said, I went to university. I went to business school, basically. I have an undergraduate and a graduate degree in business. And this is in the 1990s when I went to university, what universities taught you about your career path. Your career path is a straight line going up from graduation through individual contributor, becoming a manager, and then retiring happy ever after. Of course, in reality, it doesn't work that way. Your planning horizon does not extend to retirement, and life is full of surprises. There are unexpected things that happen. Companies that are supposed to do well do not do so well. You lose your job. There's opportunities, and this is really what a career path looks like, full of ups and downs and full of unexpected things. And there is no way that you can predict all this at the beginning of your career. Same with me. I never expected to end up in space. This is kind of what my CV looks like. Those are not speed limits. Those are actually the ages, the numbers in this thing. And my career started off as my university told me in the beginning, starting from the ground up. I worked in business, no opportunities in space. I was not interested in math and physics. I was actually really bad at math and physics, so space for me was ruled out as soon as I made my choice to go to university. At least that's what I thought. So I joined the IT industry, which offered loads of jobs in the early 1990s, and had a very nice career in the industry. Companies called Digital Equipment Corporation that did not believe that PCs would ever be a big thing, so it went bust rather quickly. Compaq Financial Services, Hewlett Packard, Oracle, all the big IT companies I joined, until I found myself at age 35 being a management consultant for one of the big five, thinking, wow, is this it? And at age 35, I was at the point where I thought I would be upon retirement, and I still had most of my career ahead of me. So I reconsidered things, and through social media, I refound my childhood passion for space. And there were loads of people on the internet, on social media, that kind of convinced me that space is not just for rocket scientists, not just for people with a PhD in physics, but there's a place in space for everyone, really. And they convinced me that that I should find myself a role in the space industry. I was 40 at that moment, and I just started all over again. I went back to school. I joined the International Space University, a program called the Space Studies program. I didn't want to do a full new master, so I did the kind of an expedited summer school, very intense for those of you who've heard of it. Do check it out. For me, that was my ticket into the space industry. After being brainwashed by the space mafia for 9 weeks, for those of you who've been there and know exactly what I mean, I came out of ISU reborn in a way. I was 40, but I felt like I was 25, and I joined the space industry. But without a background in space, as some of my colleagues here have mentioned, it's rather difficult. So I started volunteering. I joined an organization called the World Space Week Association, and I started to earn my credits in space through volunteering jobs, through freelance projects in social media, my other passion in life. I became very active in the International Space University itself, because I did find that in academia, the business skills that I had built up in my previous career were actually very valid and very applicable to the space industry, because obviously space is an industry like many others where the business process itself, the way the business runs, is not so different from many other industries. So my skills there were valuable. I volunteered as a teacher, and then through projects, I kind of gained my confidence, and it's much more about confidence than about knowledge and skills in this case. And I was able to present myself to companies as a very confident, knowledgeable person about space, combined with the background that I had in my previous IT life. I started finding jobs in space. I continue to do volunteer jobs because I enjoy it. I'm a networker. I like to connect people, and volunteering jobs in these big NGOs are perfect ways to connect people. So I continue doing that, and I decided to leave the corporate world behind and run my own show. So I'm now self-employed. I run my own company, just me, myself, and I, doing things that I find interesting and that I find add value to the space industry. And that's where I find myself right now, in the middle of a second career. To highlight what Andrew said in his presentation before, I've never been poorer, but I've also never been happier. And that brings me to some of my career observations, and also in line with some of the questions that I saw. We see lots of questions in the Q&A about specific qualifications that you need. Well, let me tell you, it doesn't matter too much what diplomas you have, as long as you have them. Do you need a bachelor degree, a master's degree, a PhD? They're all great as long as you have some sort of degree. Because the thing is, the job that you'll be in, the space job that you'll be in the future, that probably doesn't even exist today. Many of the jobs that you will find yourself in 10, 15 years, nobody's heard of them today, but they will be valid and relevant in 10, 15 years from now. There's no way that a diploma can train you for a very specific job in the future that nobody knows what it will look like. Besides, the knowledge that you gain in university and school kind of loses its relevance, its value, and also the way the brain works. You can't remember all the equations that you learned in aerospace engineering. You lose 30% of it every year. Continuous education, training on the job is critically important. So graduating from school doesn't mean graduating from education, because education is for life. And that's especially valid in the space industry, which changes so rapidly that you will need to continue to catch up. It's also never too late to change a career that doesn't make you happy. And I'm the prime example of that. I was not happy in my job as a management consultant, and I made a very drastic change. And the magic, as I say here, happens outside your comfort zone. Just jump, just do it. If you get good tips, if you get the opportunity, if people open doors for you without knowing exactly what's behind it, if you're not happy in what you're doing, just take the jump. It can lead to very good results. Fun, I find it extremely important to have fun in life and to do stuff that make me happy, that interest me, that excite me, that trigger the passion that I have for space in life, and that is what I'm really after. If you do what you love, you won't work a single day in your life. It doesn't mean that you won't work. It means that you will work 7 days a week, 24 hours a day, but it doesn't feel like work. Anyway, specifically for space, I have to say, and I find this extremely important because this is why I love working in the space industry. As many of you, I have a big passion for space, for the technology, for rockets, for the power, for the smoke, for the satellites, for the questions that we have about the universe. I came for the rockets, but I stayed for the people. The space industry is very much a people-driven industry, and we're all driven by a shared passion that makes it so cool to be part of that. Space is all about passion. Again, I can't stress it enough, just like Andrew said, space is about passion more than it is about money. They say, and I think it's true, and many of you have heard it, if you want to be a millionaire in space, you start as a billionaire. What I like, what Kathy said in her presentation, space is very international. Once you're part of space, you'll find yourself traveling all over the world, meeting all kinds of interesting people, often meeting the same people over and over again in all kinds of interesting locations all around the world. But that just emphasizes the family feel that this industry sometimes has. It's also very interdisciplinary. I see lots of people here talk about engineering and being an engineer. Well, let me tell you, space is not driven by engineers. Of course, engineering is a big, important part of space, but it's not just about engineering. It's about interdisciplinarity, all these different disciplines that come together to make things work. Space is not about rocket science. Rocket science is just a part of it. It's an important part, but it's not all about rocket science. There are different disciplines that make it all work. And the good thing is, and that's here in the UK, but in many other countries, there's lots of initiatives to grow the space industry. This whole new space thing that Katie explained in the beginning, this new space phenomena, the commercialization of a large chunk of space exploration is creating thousands of new jobs. And to me, COVID is just a hiccup. COVID is not going to stop the growth of the space industry. It's hindering us now. It may hinder us for a year, for 2 years, for 3 years, but space is here to stay, and space will continue to need thousands of new people in the next decade, if only for the gray, and well, I'm almost getting gray, people that will retire in the next years. These people need to be replaced. Space needs people from all backgrounds and countries. Space is not just something in the US or in the UK or in other countries, big spacefaring countries. Space is about everywhere and for everyone. There's a place in space for everyone, and I'm the living and breathing example of that, because I didn't believe it for 20 years until I was convinced that there is. So this is what I've been doing during this webinar here, and I'll make sure that this becomes shareable afterwards. But this answers quite a few questions. So let me run through real quick, and this is my last slide. Some tips based on your questions. Build your space network. If you don't have a network in space, if you're a student, if you don't know exactly how to become part of this wonderful world of space, build your space network early. There's lots of organizations like SEDS has been mentioned a few times, and I can't mention enough. Very active here in the UK, very active in the US, and they have different areas, sort of different groups and different universities around the world. The Space Generation Advisory Council, SJC, is another big one. It's the kind of the UN arm representing young professionals in space. For anyone between 18 and 35, join them. It's an extremely active organization that organizes loads of events, and it's a great network building opportunity. There's Women in Aerospace. There's lots of space organizations you can join. Get in touch with us. It's been mentioned, mentors. Space is a very, very friendly industry, despite what some people may say. It's difficult to get into, well, perhaps, but the people that are in it are willing to share their knowledge, are willing to get in touch. Find a mentor. Really good. I'm talking to a few young people out there who are looking to get into the industry, and I'm more than happy to help them find people to talk to and find their way in space. Are there no space companies in your country? We see the question a few times from people in countries that don't have a very highly developed space industry or don't see the opportunities in their countries. Well, help build it. I have loads of friends in, for example, a good example is Costa Rica, that didn't have a space industry. A few people were thinking, how can we, without leaving the country, do something in space? Well, build it yourself. Especially universities are great places to start building CubeSats, start working with this technology, start learning the programming languages that are relevant to space, learn Python, start programming these little CubeSats. There's lots of very inexpensive kits nowadays where you can learn that stuff. Just do it and help build a space industry around it. We need lawyers, we need communicators, we need marketeers, we need people, especially a lot of people in space data science, Earth observation, big opportunities there, space medicine, space art. There's a lot of specializations that go beyond engineering. Attend space events near you, we've said it, spaceagenda.com. I volunteer as an event data entry person at spaceagenda.com, making sure that all the events are out there and that you know about them. Going back to school, the International Space University, I mentioned it. If you want to hone your interdisciplinary space knowledge, check it out. Maybe it's something for you. It was for me. For me, it was a total game changer. Hackathons. If you're a non-space professional and you want to get yourself into space, meet people, get familiar with some of the challenges in the space industry, join these hackathons. They're free. They're open to anyone, not just programmers, not just IT people, but also designers, people with good ideas, people with business skills. Join these hackathons. There's Copernicus hackathons, the NASA Space Apps Challenge is running next week. Act in Space is in November. There are loads of COVID challenges. I think the UK Space Agency is sponsoring a few of these COVID challenges to see what space data can do for COVID at the moment. There's loads of these opportunities that you can join for free and easily and get to know people. Same, if you have a good idea, I'd say go to a hackathon first to kind of feel what's out there. But there's space incubators. The ESA Business Incubator Network is a great place to find information about how you could possibly use some of the IP that exists in the industry and apply it to new areas, bringing space knowledge outside of space or bringing knowledge from outside of space into space. Copernicus and Galileo Masters is something like that, an idea competition for Earth observation and satellite navigation data. Very good ways to get your feet wet. and then volunteer. I started by volunteering. I had no knowledge of space, and I started to volunteer. There's loads of organizations, World Space Week, the British Interplanetary Society, the Space Up Foundation. There's a STEM Ambassadors Network in the UK, but it exists outside the UK as well. I mentioned SEDS, I mentioned the Space Generation Advisory Council. There are solar system ambassadors in the US, model rocketry clubs, that was my latest edition, great idea, astronomy clubs. There's loads of ways to get involved. So I hope this kind of summarizes a few of the questions that, that were out there. And with that, I've taken way too much time already. So thank you very much, and make sure you, you connect.